Hello, my name is Lisa Rudd, and one of my skill sets is HPLC validation, specifically in the pharma industry. I wanted to walk through the process of going through a method validation, and this is a validation that I myself performed from start to finish, and it is for the identification as well as the assay and determination of impurities in a capsule. So in this particular method validation that I performed, I looked at several key performance characteristics, including system precision, and I did this by performing 5 replicate injections of a standard preparation and looked at the percent RSD, or relative standard deviation. In this case, everything fell within the acceptance criteria of being no more than 2%. Both in terms of area and retention time. For the same method, I also looked at the performance characteristics of specificity. And I looked at specificity by running 2 things. I ran a diluent blank as well as a capsule excipient blend. And in this case, to fall within the acceptance criteria, there had to be no significant response, and that would be defined as less than 0.5% of the working standard peak response at the retention time of the main peak. For this method, I also validated linearity, both for the assay itself as well as for impurities. I did so by running 5 standards that ranged in concentration from 50% to 130, and this is for the assay itself. That would be the range that I looked at of the main peak. And then looked at the correlation coefficient, or R squared, as well as the slope, y-intercept, and y-intercept as percent of the working standard. And in my validation, I found that it met the criteria of R squared being greater than or equal to 0.995. I also looked at linearity for impurities, and these were either impurities that were in the sample as is, and then later I also looked at some stability studies, so these could be degradants as well that occurred over time. And in this case, also 5 standards were run, but of course the percent of the target nominal concentration for the main drug substance was quite a bit lower because we're looking down into the impurity level. So the range was from 0.05 up to 5%, and the increments were 0.05, 0.25, 1%, 2.5%, and 5%. And the R squared criteria were less stringent. It had to be greater than or equal to 0.98. In my method validation that I performed, also I looked at determining the limit of quantitation, or LOQ, as well as the limit of detection, or LOD. I did so by performing 6 replicate injections of a sample of this main component, and it was prepared at the low-level range of only 0.05% of the nominal target, and the nominal target would be considered 100%. And in this case, limit of LOQ would be defined as signal to noise of 10 or greater to meet that criteria. And the percent RSD also had criteria as well. For the peak area, had to be less than or equal 10%. For the LOQ, we in this case it involved 3 injections of a sample, and looking at percent RSD, and also looking at the signal to noise being 3 or greater. And I think actually it was actually 6 injections. I think there was a typo here, but it was actually 6 injections to determine both the signal to noise as well as the percent RSD for the peak responses. I also evaluated method precision, accuracy, recovery, and again, to look at all of this, I looked at, for the main peak, not for the impurities, I looked at 3 sample preps at 50%, at 130%, and 6 preparations at 100% of the target nominal concentration. And so percent recovery was calculated and based on an N of 5 or 5 replicates. And so recovery to meet criteria had to fall within 97.0 to 103.0. And then the mean at each level. And when we're talking about mean, the levels are going to be 50%, 100, and 130. That actually had to have a tighter, more stringent criteria of 98.0 to 102.0. And the percent RSD for the 100% level had to be less than or equal to 2%. So for precision, we had an N of 6, 100% level, and you want to see how precise or basically how close everything would fall within each other when you have 6 replicate samples. And the criteria in this case were the percent RSD for 6 capsule preps had to be less than or equal to 3%. Range, the parameters were evaluated, accuracy, recovery, linearity, and LOD. And so as I already outlined those performance characteristics, the data had to meet the specified criteria. And as I mentioned earlier in the video, a solution stability study was looked at because it's very important to see from time 0 up through 72 hours what would happen with both a standard solution as well as a sample solution. And the T0 obviously was taken from the accuracy, recovery, and precision data at 100% concentration. And I had 2 sets of samples, some that were stored on the benchtop at room temperature and some that were refrigerated. And between these 2 sets of samples, I looked at basically the response factor at 24, 48, and 72 hours. And basically for both the standard and the sample, they could not vary more than 2% from what the T0 was. So I performed this validation, and luckily everything did fall within the parameters, and I was able to formally formalize my results in a paper that was submitted to the client, and all of that was nice and done. And I did want to just also highlight some other things that I've learned working in the pharma industry. Of course, I am well versed in Carl Fisher titrations. I'm also somewhat well versed in maintaining stability chambers. So I've had the opportunity to keep stability chambers up and going and maintained, and records of the different plots of the stability chambers. Again, that's part of being in pharma. And with most of my pharma experience, I've worked with Agilent systems, whether they be the 1100 series or the 1200 series, and have also had an opportunity to do some other techniques in pharma, including XRPD and some physical characterizations. So I've had a pretty good run with my pharma experience. Have had experience in the GMP environment with pharma, both at PharmaCore as well as with BI in Columbus, Ohio. And in my role in BI, I was responsible for quality control of liquids, liquid drug product that was just being about to be released. So, of course, we wanted to make sure that there was consistency with label strength, no unknowns of impurities below certain, above a certain amount that were in the product, quite obviously, and maintaining all of that under GMP guidelines. And then, of course, I have worked at GSK as an intern, where I did some work with method development for a new assay for basically looking at percent recovery of a tablet in a matrix situation, and basically I determined which diluent would be best for dissolving that tablet and looking at recovery. And so basically I developed a method from scratch with that, figured out the correct mobile phase to use, the correct diluent to use, the correct wavelength for absorption based on the lambda max of the main peak, and just got some good experience with that. So this video just highlighted a lot of more of my HPLC and karma experience. I'm going to do another video that explains some of my GC experience in other areas such as the tobacco industry that I've worked in. And so I really hope you enjoyed my presentation and will stay tuned for more. Thank you so much.